Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 18th episode of my design journey, hosted by Just Design. Just Design is a design community with a singular aim of democratizing design. And we do this by promoting design excellence. And we have a couple of webinars in the last about 24 months where we feature the journey of veteran architects. And today we have a very exciting, uh, very senior colleague. He's a mentor. He's someone we have seen from afar, and we have also seen him at a very close range. He has over 30 years, in fact, about 35 years experience in the industry. His experience has cut across uh, industry practice core. He's had to also work with Arcon. He's had to work with NIA. He has been the, well, I'm sure by the time we read his bio, and that will say it all. But I think today it's interesting to have Architect Ladipo Lewis, fellow of the Young Institute of Architects, join us today. And shortly we'll see his bio, and thereafter we'll have his presentation. Thank you very much for joining us. You're welcome.
Architect Ladipo Adeseye Lewis is a distinguished architect and design consultant with extensive experience in luxury, residential, commercial, and institutional projects across Nigeria and beyond. As the principal partner at Aztec ASC Design Consultants, he has led innovative developments that showcase his experience in architecture, urban planning, real estate, and project management. With a BSc and MSc in architecture from the University of Jos, Architect Lewis is renowned for his commitment to design excellence and forward-thinking solutions. A respected leader in the Nigerian design community, Architect Lewis has held key positions in the Nigerian Institute of Architects, NIA, and the Association of Consulting Architects of Nigeria, ACAN. His dedication to education and professional growth is evident through his contribution to the NIA Education Board and ACAN committees. With international exposure gained from seminars and collaborations worldwide, he brings a global perspective to sustainable, community-centered architecture. Architect Lewis is a passionate speaker, mentor, and visionary shaping the future of design in Nigeria and beyond.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Architect Ladipo Lewis. Thank you for having me today. It's a great opportunity to present on this platform, and I'm sure we're going to enjoy my journey through architecture. Yeah, so this is the Design Journey episode 18, and this is just a collage of what I say is my experience in architecture. And I can say my experience starts from two uh, quotes that I like to keep in mind. One by Daniel Bonham, Chicago's legendary urban planner. He says, make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. In that format, you might say, aim for the sky, and make your dream as big as possible. And one of the lessons I learned is start with what you have. Ask, seek, acquire knowledge to get what you don't have. And I keep that in mind whenever I meet an obstacle or I'm searching for something. And no matter how long it takes, I just follow those principles. Now, my dream to become an architect started when I was at the age of 4. When my dad asked me, what do you want to be? I said, engineer, because I had two senior uncles who were engineers. And he said, look, become the architect. You'll be the leader of the team. And that stuck with me. Now, I call this an unexpected journey because I really didn't know what architecture was. I loved to build cardboard models and sandcastles as a child. And I had this perception of what architecture was my grandfather had a book on architecture where he dabbled into architecture and draftsmanship early in his life. So I used to go through that book a lot, and I used to see the drawings in it. So I attended Batron High School, Surrey, and took technical drawing as a key subject in secondary school. And should also have taken fine art, which I'll tell you how that came up, how that became a nightmare to me. I had a rotring drawing T-square set in school, this exact version of it, and I probably was the only one who had it in the entire school. Now, in the JAM brochure, it specified the need for a BSc and MSc to become a licensed architect. I saw that the year I took JAM for the first time in 1983. And thus, I avoided the Polytechnic. I opted for A-levels for 1 year, so I ended up taking JAM twice. I couldn't make the higher cutoff mark for University of Jos the first time. And that's another story. I will just chip in for those people who probably have had the experience, or there might be somebody who is still attempting it, is that there were 2 cutoff marks in University of Jos. For I, who was a Lagos State indigene, it was 285. For anybody from anywhere else, it was 215. And I had 269 that first year. So I decided I wasn't going to the Polytechnic. I was just going to go to A-levels and do JAM the second time. I needed to be a licensed architect. I just had that mindset that that's the ultimate. I was just 15 years old. So I did JAM again 84. And this time around, I gave it my best and I scored 294. And I told my dad, let them try and not admit me this time around. It was a journey I had made up my mind to follow, but and I said it's unexpected. I met a lot of hitches along the way. BS and MSc from University of Jos, as you said, my student days, my inspiration and challenges. BS and MSc from University of Jos was from 84 till 90. I remember the first year it was tough. The first lecture we had, we were told, I'm sure you guys have told your parents you're spending 6 years here. Please go back and tell them the 6 years plus X, and X tends to infinity. Wow. It was a reality check. This unexpected journey was something I didn't plan for. So I scored Z minus in the first sketching assignments in 100 level. But I ended up finishing the year with A++. I taught myself to do the above portraits. Copying them from books and drawing them live, looking at the images and drawing them. And I built up my capacity. So I developed drawing skills by copying sketching techniques from books. I even went into botany books, horticulture books in the school library, and I mastered pencil drawing. For someone who couldn't draw a straight line, I practiced it from beginning to end. I developed rendering techniques using pen and ink or paper by buying every book and photocopying others I could lay my hands on. I was also inspired by a classmate of mine with far more years of experience and skills than I had. His name was Abiodun Bello. He had spent some years in other schools, and these 2 lower sketches drawings were his drawings, and this was in 200 level, and I had a lot of challenges to catch up with. But I can say anybody can learn to draw, and that's what a lesson I picked up. My inspiration was, I'm inspired by the architecture and drawings of Frank Lloyd Wright, Paul Rudolph, John Lautner, Steve Owes, Kenzo Tange, Paulo Soleri, and Richard Mayer. These are some images of their projects that we used to see in magazines when we went to the library or got a book on architecture about them. The library was not well stocked, but everything we could lay our hands on or our friends had, we borrowed, we photocopied, we learned from them. We also the basic theories of architecture were there, but we all fell in love with organic architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright was like our mentor. And you see later how I built on this. And then we felt, look, we had to do ecological designs. Just had rocky and elevated topography. But one thing I also noticed that we did was that we loved history of architecture. And Sir Bannister Fletcher was a book that we all loved to hold in the library, borrow repeatedly. You can see Paul Rudolph was a pen and ink master, and as you see along, I had to learn from them. I also loved the architecture of Kenzo Tange, as I mentioned, use of concrete metabolism. Paulo Soleri was a thinker who created the city called Akosanti and actually built it. Of course, I loved Richard Mere's forms and white facade. And then the pen and ink of people like Davis Bites and Mark Denolovi-Novodovsky. These were things that inspired us in the early years in architecture school, and we built on this. We loved to look at the images. We loved to try and simulate them in our designs. 200 to 600 level was a period where I developed hand drawing skills. I experimented with mixed media, markers, pastels, pen and ink. Mastered the art of design, conceptualization, and presentation. Always created innovative project topics. I'll be given a topic and I'll change it. I'll make something unique out of it. Detailed pen and ink rendering, we use color rendering, project analysis, form analysis. And I need to emphasize the fact that we had a studio culture. We had a famous professor of architecture then, Dr. Aderele Awotono, who instilled a lot of discipline and instilled the idea of the studio culture. Yeah, we needed to learn from each other, and we did. In 200 level, I had this design. This was my very first design. It was a church design, and I called it Christ Chapel, based on a church already existing in Lagos then. And you can see the concept was a dove. The structure itself was, was just to simulate that. So already looking at it in design, then what I always tell people today is that the concept is not just in plan. In plan, it was like a dove with a halo around it. In elevation, it was like a dove taking flight. So I had to simulate every form of it. And you can see that I borrowed from Kenzo Tange's architecture. I borrowed from the pen and ink rendering of people like Paul Rudolph, Dave Bites, and Denolovi Rovodovsky. In 3rd level, we had the design of a hilltop residential building, and the concept I had was a guppy fish. It's an aquarium fish that my sister brought back from Europe when she came back, and I used to see this fish in the aquarium, and I said, wow, that would be a concept for my next project. And of course, we had this project of a luxury house on a hillside facing a lake, which you had a lot of that in Jos, and I designed the form to look like the fish, the guppy fish. So concept comes in. In 400 level, we had this design for an urban design project, but also I had to do a bank. And I said a mod tank would be my concept. But if you look at the design, it's not that you had to design it to look exactly like an armored tank, but in form, in analysis, theoretically, it gives that concept of a solid armored tank in the design and in the facade, in the scale of the building, the rhythm of the forms, and the silhouette that it gives. In 400 level, it was a bus terminal, and of course, I wanted the terminal to look like that, and that was a design concept there. And also, I started looking at how designs and forms work and how functional flows relate to it. I could imagine at this level, I was already looking at how a bus terminal could actually work like a transit terminal, an airport, and that was the idea that I had, that look, it should work like a terminal. You could come in, drop your bags off. You had separate entrances for the buses, separate entrances for private vehicles. And I started to see how a design works functionally. And that's what I learned in school and picked up. My work experience, I developed further rendering techniques during NYSC, and I served in Akure, then in the former Ondo State. And if you look at it, that's when I developed the techniques of rendering by Steve O's using just colored pencils. And I did a lot of interviews in first, but always got rejected. But they would always keep my renderings, which I found surprising. They would keep my renderings then. But I then got work in two small design build firms called Bofield and Bolak from 1991 to 97. And it was while I was there, I developed a lot of the renderings. I started doing temporary renderings, and I got interested also in working drawings. So my office used to sell my renderings to the clients, and I got paid a fee for them, which was an extra bonus to my salary. In fact, from the renderings, sometimes I was getting about twice my salary in a month, and also contributing to the office expenses, because the office made quite a lot of money from those renderings. And I worked for 6 years to build a portfolio for the professional exams in 1997 and registration with Acon. I reached to believe that, look, I needed to have a platform to work on. A few years later, after registration, I got invited to contribute to the NIA Lagos chapter, and then became the chairman from 2012 to 2016, concluding almost 8 years in the exco. And it was also a time for me to contribute back to the profession. And we did a lot of educational programs. We built the LAF conference forum to an international conference where we brought in various architects. We brought in a director from Zahadi and Associates. We brought in one of the directors from Parkins Eastman and some architects, the principals of Edge, a big firm in Dubai. And we came to Nigeria. And I'll tell you how this came about of building relationships. One of the renderings you have here is actually that of the Mint in Abuja. I did this for Shelter Architects then, way back then. I heard one of my boss came one day and said one of my renderings, the client puts it in front of his bed in his bedroom, and he looks at it constantly that this is the house I'm going to build. And it was quite inspiring for me to hear that, and it encouraged me to improve my standards and also improve my skills. These are various renderings I did within that period of my early career. Learn to use markers, learn to use colored pencils, learn to draft, in pencil as well. Use any media I had, could do renderings in freehand. So I always wanted to work in a big firm, but it never happened. So this forced me to develop a self-sustaining capacity to generate architectural projects and product development. I did logos for Terry's Burger, did all kinds of graphics works as well. Discovered the need to acquire the knowledge in construction detail and built a library of books on architecture and construction working drawings and details. This database helped me in my career as a professional practice examiner from 2010 till date. And I can tell you, I keep a huge library which I will talk about. These are a few of the temporal perspective renderings I did while working as a young architect, and a lot of these renderings helped the office a lot. Then there were really computers available for everyone. Then I'm talking of the early 90s. So work philosophy and guiding principles: develop interest in architecture as a developer and financially viable projects. So I started studying the work of John Portman, who wrote a book, The Architect as Developer. I got a copy of a photocopy of that book, and I ended up ordering the original when I had the resources on Amazon. So I'll put my early mentors as John Portman and Jonathan Segal, who also has a website, thearchitectasdeveloper.com, and you can check it out. Then I attend international architecture conferences regularly. I design with any 3D software: SketchUp, ArchiCAD, Morpholio. I use Adobe Acrobat. Morpholio is actually a tool that I use to do site sketches digitally, details digitally on site. And I use SketchUp for everything, including working drawings. I also read a lot of books. I acquire books, which I'll show next about what I do with the collections I have. Most importantly, I learned from an architect called Robert Stern. And he says his library has about over 32,000 volumes as at the time he was granted the interview, of books. He says his office has more books than some schools of architecture. And visiting various offices worldwide, Zahadi's office, Parkins Eastman, Fumiko Maki, and so many others, I discovered they all have libraries. They even employ librarians as members of staff. And I have someone who archives my work too as well. I also believe in 3D detailing, doing your details in 3D. So I visit iconic architecture buildings worldwide, take inspiration from notable architects, membership of various architectural associations, member of I'm an international associate of the American Institute of Architects. I've been part of the International Parking Institute, Center for Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, ISOCAP, International Parking Institute, as I mentioned, and so many other organizations that the Property Care Institute in UK that deals with waterproofing and dam proofing. So I visited Grand Designs, quite a lot of them. So I've developed a personal architectural library, and I keep samples of working drawings from all over the world. I also have a library of 3D digital details. So, and that I used to, now look at my projects carefully. I have over 100 plus video CDs, on architecture, 3,000 plus books, magazines in hard copy, digital 600 plus volumes on my iPad. And I have this Kindle app as well that I buy volumes of books, and then PDFs, brochures, probably most about 6,000 in my office. It takes quite a large room to keep them. And I have books on all aspects of architecture. Any part of architecture, I buy the books on it, from history of architecture to working drawings to presentation to digital media, whatever. And I visit buildings. The pictures here are all buildings I've visited worldwide. One of them is the Singapore National Library by Ken Yang. In fact, I also met him at a conference and he signed a book for me. I've been to Calatrava's structures in Valencia, where, and I've been to John Portman's almost 40-story high circular hotel, and which has a revolving restaurant at the top, and it actually revolves actually. So the lot of, I've been to Falling Waters, Guggenheim Museum, Bilbao, been to the Shard, been to the Gherkin by Norman Foster, the Shard by Renzo Piano. So a lot of conferences over the years. I constantly did that because I always felt I didn't have enough knowledge. I didn't have enough experience, and I needed to acquire it. And because an architect once told me at a conference, said, look, you can't talk about what you've not experienced. You can't design what you've not experienced. And doing that opened my eyes to what architecture could be all about. So over the years, I've been attending plenty of conferences all over the world, every part of the world, from Asia, to the Americas, to the Europe, and even to South Africa. So, and buildings too, I love to visit architectural buildings of note. I've been to Robbie House, I've been to Zahadid's 1000 Museum in Miami, probably, and I think probably about a month or so before she died. Been to La Sagrada Familia, of course, Center Pompidou by Richard Rogers, the Olympic Swimming Pool by Zahadid. Then the historical ones, the St. Peter's Basilica by Michelangelo and Giacomo della Porta, St. Paul's Cathedral by Sir Christopher Wren, the Ringoto in Turin by Renzo Piano, and the Sistine Chapel in Rome, and quite a lot of them. So the Guggenheim Museum in New York by Frank Lloyd Wright, and then the hotels by John Portman are unique because a developer designed hotels. So, and then the Marina Bay Sands by Moshe Safdie, lovely building. I got to get a tour of it. The city center in Las Vegas, and so many of them. And I've enjoyed that as a part of my love for architecture. Now, let me go to my case studies. The first project I can pick out was a project that was designed way back in 1999 or completed in 1999. And it traversed the office I worked in, and it was actually a project I put in for my professional exams. I worked in the office. My boss was actually a design build architect, but I got to do the design from beginning to end. Curious story was that it was a relative of mine that told a client, his friend, that, look, why don't you've been talking about your design, you don't like designs you've been given, why don't you try my young nephew? He's a young architect. And I got this brief, took it to my boss. My boss said, okay, go and design it since you know what to do. The office will build it. So I got to design this house. It's a 5-bedroom luxury house with a courtyard and a hemispherical fountain in between it. It was a grilling design because everything had to be designed. Everything was imported. but I had my boss's oversight over it. But he left me to do practically everything in that design from beginning to end. I was the one going to attend the client's meetings in his office, going around with the client, looking for building materials, looking for the details we needed for the building. My boss was busy doing other projects, and I was left to resolve all these issues myself and come up with the designs, numerous sketches, numerous design proposals. The client was a mechanical electrical engineer, so he had a lot of experience in the construction industry, and it pushed me to my limit. Strangely enough, the project won an award 15 years after it had been built. And one of the unique things about this design is that till date, it's still standing there. It's still a unique building. The client still loves it. And we still went back about 2 years ago to renovate the master bedroom and modernize it. And what I see about it was that it taught me a lesson about good design. Building that's this old still appears timeless because the architecture did not just imitate what was around then, it also looked into the future as per the design. I said it looks, I always claim that it was supposed to look like a Ferrari, the Ferrari of architecture. And today the building is still there, kept solid by the client, and he's not done one single alteration to the facade. He says it's a piece of sculpture that he wants to keep, and that everybody keeps on asking him who designed this building. So that's one of my case studies about good architecture. The second one is a project. If I would say the project origin, I was a consultant, initiated this real estate project as a joint venture partnership with the financial institution and Lagos State government. It's an urban market in central Lagos. This is a combination of the things I'd seen in Singapore, of a retail market where it's not open air, it's enclosed, but it can function without electricity. And what we did was to turn your typical market into an urban mall. There were over 670 shops of various sizes in it, and it was my first major enroll into being part of a development, having equity holdings in the company. And today I got the company owned 100% now, and we're looking to renovating the building. The partners have exited. But what it taught me then was I had to learn some lessons about, funding, about debt, about, project control, financial control in the project. But it's an opportunity that I had and took, and it's not the only project that I had developed, that initiated from the architect developer format. The third one is also kind of, a twist of a story. A client took me to a one-story building in Adetuku Bademola and said, look, I want to renovate this building. And I said, why do you want to do that? The planning authority allows you to do 15 floors here, and we could do a basement and penthouse to it. And he said, so what am I going to do with it? I said, you could rent it out. And that's how he said, okay, let's see what you can do. I had to do the design concept, do the analysis, do the financial cash flow, look at how the building will be built, how much it will cost, and how much will be its value. And then look at introducing quite a little bit of innovation in it. On 1,200 square meters, we ended up having 550 square meters of floor space. And that's the lettable space, apart from the built-up space, which we had almost another about 20% of that, 15 to 20% of that. So it needed us to cantilever on practically almost all sides. And, we had to have 5 floors of multi-story parking to meet the parking requirement. Then go underground in the basement, I had to learn about sumps, I had to learn about waterproofing and all that, the detailing of that. Way back then, I'm talking of, this project was probably started off around 2010, designed, probably initiated in 2008, but construction started there about 2010. But it was interesting because of the use of materials, and I understood I could experiment with the glass and see that it worked. In fact, I bought an infrared camera to test heat signature on the building and discovered that even when there is no air conditioning on in the building, it's not heated through the glass. And it has a helipad on the rooftop. So we designed everything, including the conference table, the reception table, and built it for uh, a cost that my contractor claimed was not going to be possible at the end of the day, but we did it. And it was financially viable. And it ended up being sold to one of the parastatals today for quite a whooping sum, which is in the media. So then I want to conclude with this project, which is still ongoing. It's a 10-unit, 4-bedroom suite, split level terrace unit with 2 car park spaces each. This is built on 600 diameter piles going 20 to 30 meters depth on just 1,300 square meters. This project has tested me in a sense because every building in that area is either sunk or is tilting. And in fact, on this site, we met 2 buildings that had sunk into the ground, and we had to remove them. And then we now had to design in that space. The cost of removal was expensive because we had concrete that had sunk into the ground to about 3 to 6 meters, and they had to be pulled out. And with the kind of piles we had to do, the cost of the piles, it was like making the project not financially viable. So we had to think of something innovative to do, and we did it. We did quite a lot of tests, and that's where technical knowledge comes in as an architect. And we had to put in some innovation into it. It's currently being sold off plan. We are getting close to roofing level now, but the client has sold about 3 or 4 units already, and probably he's getting his return on investment as we speak. But what I'd say is that it was me initiating as a consultant a project for a client. And I keep on saying this that when your client has a benefit, he has a reason to pay you fees. I'm not going to talk about the fees I charge here for projects like this, but I can tell you it's way, way better than the scale of fees of the 1999 federal government rate. And I believe that if you take up a project, you need to do it well. You need to be able to put in the resources. We can afford to do 165 pages of working drawings, model every aspect of it, including the piling, model the changes in positions of the piling from the original to what exists on site, and continue to modify our models because you have enough resources to focus on the project, and you don't have to do too many resources to get by. Importantly, I'll say learning from your experience, or let's say my experience. Prepare to be dependent on the client by investing in real estate. What I mean by real estate is everything that is real. Your books, I believe, are real estate. Your knowledge is real estate. Everything you have that you can use to generate resources, returns is real estate. And I tell people, look, I buy books to create knowledge, to create projects that also create resources. And it's more comforting to be able to do 1 or 2 projects that actually pay you well than to do a massive ton that you simply just rush through. And I don't do construction. I generally avoid it. Except it's my project, I generally avoid, getting involved in construction. So I focus more on design than anything else. So I would say invest in architectural knowledge, research skills, new technology, and assets. I'm always acquiring new technology, from laser tapes. I have one that does over 200 meters and comes with a camera, and I can take levels. I can measure the height of any building with it. I have a tool called Moazure that I can simply put my iPhone on it and take it around the site and take my own site measurements, heights, levels. I can take perimeters of the building. I can even measure materials put on site with that tool. And I have all the laser tools, cutting tools, and things like that on site. I sell my contractor, if you can't do this well, I can get you. I have the tool for it. I have my own dumpy level when I feel it's necessary for me to check out something. And what I do it use as a consultant. I only use it to check out for my information. The contractor is obligated to do that himself and is liable for that. But if I want to query him, and I want to query him with knowledge, and I take out my tools and I show them that, look, something is wrong. And I've done it quite a lot of times on site when I'll tell the contractor, you are off by so amount of meters, and they would argue, and then I just prove him wrong. So I always say develop a broad range of business skills. I've learned to read financial statements. I've learned to understand, shares. I've learned to understand legal documents, laws of Nigeria. Then develop financial knowledge. I can do a simple Excel sheet, financial pro forma for a development, and that's probably what I'm getting now. A lot of proposals like that, where you have to do financial analysis and say whether a project is viable or not of his fee, and do a feasibility study on it, and then come up with the codes and requirements for it. You need to do business research skills. One will be encountering all kinds of proposals for all kinds of buildings, and you must be up to date in knowledge. And I've said, be able to write feasibility report, understand feasibility report writing. Construction management is important. If you do a project and you can't, at the end of the day, prove that it's going to be viable to your client, from the day construction starts, you're going to have a problem. Yes, you could have it on paper, but how do you manage it during construction? How do you stop costs going out of hand? You need to learn about value engineering. You need to learn about how to manage costs critically. So it's important. Then you need to build relationships. And two things I would say to conclude: architectural practice is a marathon, not a sprint. The projects and financial curve goes up and down, and it changes with time. And you need to prepare for it. If you read the history of a lot of architects, like even Norman Foster, he tell you there were times when they had to take loans to survive. And they were doing a major project at that time. They were doing Lloyd's building, and they are going through that kind of a scenario. And it's something that you even Franco Wright had to live through a dry period, and that's why he developed the Taliesin West and East School premises. So he ended up being, an academic just to survive. So it's important that you also learn to, ride that curve. What you do when things are good will determine how well you survive when things are down. So it's it's a journey that is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So I want to encourage everyone who is listening to this, that look, it's knowledge acquisition. It's the most important thing. That's what you sell as an architect. And I believe that the opportunities are still there. I'm encountering projects that are bigger than anything I've ever done. Even one is bigger than all the projects I've ever done combined together up to date. And these are opportunities that come only because you have the knowledge. People will call you, people will consult you because of the knowledge you have. And even if you're retired, you can move around and your brain is still functional, you're still going to get people consulting you to write papers, look at projects, bring them solutions. So I would like to end here where we can ask questions and answers on this session. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a humbling experience. Thank you all. You're muted.
Over the years. Oh, I think I was mute for a while. So I think I'll just recap. So Alalade, thank you very much for your presentation. It's been quite an exciting and inspiring presentation. Like I mentioned, it appeared that you prepared this presentation like a professor would do in the academia for his inaugural lecture. Yes, where it will give a summary of his journey, and I think that's what we're about to, you know, we're about here in Just Design, and I think we are very grateful that I mean, I can see all of the effort you put into this presentation, and there's so much to learn that you packed into this presentation. I'll just say a couple of my own, learning points from your very, adventurous journey. And I think the first thing, which I think is good for our audience who are aspiring designers or even designers, is that anybody can draw. I mean, I picked that, and of course, for me, I found that very helpful in my own journey as a student. I didn't start with the best of skills in terms of drawing, visual drawing. But over the years, I also picked up, and I think you nailed that. And I think it's key for students to learn, to know that anybody can draw, and of course, even in practice, anyone can design. It's about putting in the effort and the work. You put in the effort and the work into your practice, and it's showing. And I think the second thing I learned from your presentation is the power of learning from mentors. And you began by learning from the great architects such as Frank Lloyd Wright, Norman Foster, Paulo Celori of the Accosanti fame. I mean, it shows the wide array of network of mentors you had that shaped your career and shaped your work. In fact, shaped your philosophy. Thirdly, is that you were able to also develop very strong relationships in your international exposure. You traveled to various. I mean, I saw a picture of yourself and the principal of BIG. I mean,
Yeah.
that's it. That's serious. I mean, that's someone up there. And so, I mean, it shows in the kind of quality of work you've been able to display today. And I think uh, the fourth learning point for me is your your nuances about the architect as a developer. And I think it's an area that, of course, for you, that's helped you to survive in the markets of practice, where the briefs come today, they don't come tomorrow, and then with that with that philosophy, you've been able to keep your practice going. And I think, I mean, with the example of the Oluwole Mall,
Yeah.
where the project was initiated by yourself, with the government, with the financial, institution. I think that's novel. That architects just waiting every time for the clients to bring the brief. I think that's novel within this climb. I mean, a lot you put into your work, and of course, I won't forget the fact that your exposure, I think, is wide. Is wide. I mean, looking at the conferences you've attended, the seminars you've attended, the places you've visited. I mean, it's clear why you are
Thank
really top of the game. I want to say thank you for your experience,
you.
and thank you for chatting the way for younger designers. I've been trying hard to calculate how old you could be, sir. But I said so I got an inkling of that. I like mathematics a lot. So when I saw that 1990 was when you finished from uni just, so I told myself, okay, so 35 years post qualification experience. Oh, now I can fix it now.
You can fix
But
it.
yes, I
Yeah.
can fix it. So at least I can do some computation and the
Permutations.
combination.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I think you've done justice to the practice. I think the younger ones are proud of you, and there's a lot to emulate from you.
Yes.
I know you've been also very controversial in the
Yeah.
areas of the drama and all that comedy.
Yes.
But I think it's also part of what makes great architects
Yeah.
and great people. They often
Yes.
come with some measure of controversies because of their position, what they believe in. And I
Yes.
got someone telling me, look, architect Alalade, did I say yes? Can I hear about it? Of course, it's all about but I think it's for us to see how we can shape the narrative of design within the country and promote excellence and see how we can do things better. So thank you very much, sir, for your very insightful presentation. And we'll leave the floor right now for questions, and you give us some answers. And
No
so
problem.
we can begin to take questions now. Okay, so already I have someone asking a question. This is Muamola Kuye. Sir, could you please give us brief principles of architecture practice office management?
Well, let me say that your practice depends on what you want to run. Some people prefer to have a large practice, which is more like a business. So you're more like the big firms like Gensler, you're more like the big firms like HOK. Some prefer a small practice. Or some people like Jonathan Segal, it's just him and his son producing a wide range of architect developer projects. So you determine what kind of office management you want. I've run at times the big office doing a big project, and I've run the fact that, I just need myself and one other architect to do a project. So it depends on what you want to run, how you want to run it. But let me tell you this, from every office practice, no matter what you are, you're going to have assets. So you're going to have the computers, the equipment, you're going to have the library. In fact, the library is more important than anything. You can get anybody to do your drawings anywhere in the world. That's the truth today. Over the internet with communications, anybody can do your drawings. But you are the only person who can do the design, do the conceptualization, and put yourself into that project. I met Fumiko Maki, who is a Pritzker award-winning architect years ago. And in his office, just in a terrace house. And he's doing massive projects all over the world. And I said, how many people do you have in your office? He said like 30, but the majority of them are model makers, because his entire ground floor is just a model workshop, huge model workshop. So I said, how do you run all your projects all over the world? How do you get to fly from Malaysia to China to the US and all that? He said, look, I don't do stage 2 or stage 3. I do only stage 1. So he designs, does the presentations, and other people do stage 2 and stage 3 for him. And in fact, I found out in Japan that a lot of the contractors will do the stage 2 drawings for the architect. They work with the architect. The architect simply does the direction, and the contractor has an in-house, drafting team who does details and workshop drawings. So your management depends on what kind of system you want to run, what's comfortable for you. If it's a big office with big overheads and big salaries at the end of the month that you want to run, fine. If it's what you want to run is a small office that churns out bespoke projects and gets fees, and you're more like the boutique architect, fine. So it depends on the kind of management structure you want. Firms come in different styles. John Lautner simply worked with himself and one or two other architects almost throughout his entire lifetime, but his projects appear in all kinds of Hollywood movies. He's famous for that. There are some movies that you'll see some unique buildings and you don't know that are John Lautner buildings. They have timeless buildings that today are subjects of modern curiosity. So it depends on what kind of management system you want to run. Okay.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, another one from Muamala Kuye. What is the importance of an architect's knowledge of project finance? What do you see in the future of architecture in Nigeria, West African and African, with the advent of imposed Western, maybe Western practice or caution?
Well, the architect has to know about project finance if he wants to initiate projects, if he wants to get projects that get concluded. I always say this, that to date, I don't have one single abandoned building or completed structure, because I'm key about the end of a project, starting from the first line drawn. It has to be viable. He has to have the financing to complete it. So I look for every exit strategy to conclude that project. And I always tell people the future of architecture in Nigeria is bright, but I think we are losing track of holding on to architecture. Majority of architects are more of contractors. Everybody says, look, you need to do the construction, if not, the client isn't going to pay. Well, I say clients pay based on value. If they value something, they'll pay for it. So we need to develop that capacity. Now, you're talking of things being imposed by the Western world, but I say, look, we have to work around that. We have to create innovation. But being a student of history of architecture, which I love so much, I'll tell you this, that when I hear people say, oh, you need to build in mud, you need to build in thatch, you need to build in traditional African materials, I say all these materials existed in all those places. The British built with thatch, mud. and wood. So did they in America, and everywhere else architecture, has grown. They've moved to modern materials. The question is, where are we? Do we need to reinvent the wheel? Of course, everybody will know that it's difficult to build with mud in a modern high rise. Yes, you can simulate its effect, but its weight will become a crucial issue. So we need to create our own architecture for Nigeria. Look at our culture. We had a statement recently in a meeting with some fund managers, and they were talking about what could be built in Lagos that would not be acceptable somewhere else. And I said, that's true. That's how culture comes in. There are certain structures people would live in Lagos, but if you took it outside Lagos, nobody would live in it. So that's an issue that we have to address. That's how we address culture. I address our design, the opportunities for us to work with that. Now, there's another question. Thank you. Please, do you have any positions or a mentorship program for those interested? Yeah, I'm constantly mentoring people. If I have a platform that's a WhatsApp platform that I created, where I may not be too judicious throwing things on it, but I do occasionally put presentations on it. I put invites to conferences on it. And whenever I see anything interesting, I put it there. A lot of them call me and chat me up. So I have a lot of it. Sometimes I have about 9 interns in my office at the time doing IT. I sometimes tell them, look, this is your opportunity to learn. Some of them feel they can do the office work. And I tell them, look, you can't really do the office work at your level because we don't really just draft. I believe in modeling working drawings. So you need a certain level experience. And I believe in putting the details in. In fact, I've had to create my own details for various defects I've seen in buildings, created my own specifications for those. So constantly, I believe in mentoring. I've had the opportunity to be invited by the Nigerian Army, and I'm on a platform mentoring lieutenants, captains, and majors who are architects. So I'm on various platforms, and whenever I see an opportunity to contribute, I put it in there. So I'm constantly mentoring. Yes. Can it be adequate or possible for a builder to venture architecture and do it perfectly in the field? No. You can no. What I can say is that
That's no.
perfect. You can build your house. A house is just a home that you want to live in. In America, people buy their building plans and all that. You can say I want it, but it will not be architecture. Architecture is the art and science of designing buildings meant to be habited by people, and there is a science to it. There is an art to it. It takes years to learn. There was an architect who says it takes 40 years to create great architecture. So I was trying to understand what he meant. It takes 40 years to create great architecture. You can create a building, put 4 walls, a window, a roof, and a door, and windows in it, and call it a building. But can it be called architecture? It can't. When you see architecture, you know. You will see that a lot has been put into it. You have buildings like the Taj Mahal today still standing, and it's something you want to go and visit. How many of our buildings designed today can span 5 years before being called out of date or demolished? And check around you. When people buy buildings, they demolish them. They don't preserve them. Why? Because they know that architecture is just buildings. So you have to tell the difference between what architecture is and what a building is. So when you have buildings, you have the houses that a person by looks at and says, what rubbish is this? And he pulls it down. It's not architecture. Architecture will stand the test of time. You still have, St. Paul's Basilica that all the sight lines to it are being preserved in London till date. You cannot put a high rise blocking the sight line to St. Paul's Basilica. It's a planning law. So you see people preserving the Colosseum in Rome. It was an experience to go there and see it being preserved today, and people still visit it. It's a structure of wonder. I've been to the Pantheon and looked at it and said, look, this building is a church that still exists up to date, more than 2 centuries old, and yet it's still standing. That is architecture. So architecture is timeless. So sorry for the builder. He needs to go to he needs to go to architecture school and then build about 40 years of experience. Yeah, what advice do you have for young guys who aren't getting paid according to the scale of fees despite being registered? The truth is that you can't be paid according to this any scale of fees. Our scale of fees are based for consultancy services. Now, as a young architect, I always tell people that you have to earn your living just like your boss is earning his living. And you need to earn your value. As I've said before, in the office I was in, I was a business entity on its own for the office because I was creating work that the office was making money on. The money the office made from what I produced paid my salary. But if you come into an office and you simply are like any other staff that the boss has to pay, at one point, if the money is not coming in, he's not going to pay. And I always tell people that, look, a certain amount of money comes into an office. It's not just for this month's pay. It's for next month and the month after pay that no money comes in. And the business still has to survive. And you've got to realize that what value do I bring to the table as a young architect? What am I bringing? You want to be a partner in office, then you need to bring something to the table. You might be fortunate the office has the kind of money that no matter what happens, they can pay very good salaries. Somebody's bringing in the jobs. Somebody's bringing in the checks. Nobody's owing the firm because receivables are a major issue. It's everywhere in the world. If you check architects' starting salaries are the lowest. I'm telling you. Go to the UK, go to the US. In fact, Singapore is very, very bad. They claim they work 12 hours a day and they earn very low salary. So you don't get to earn salaries until you start bringing something to the table. So you've got to have value. You've got to bring value. And you need to liberate yourself too as well. Be independent, even of the firm. I encourage that. That's the kind of architect I want to work with. Somebody who is even independent of the firm, who contributes to the firm, who, if I'm not there, the firm can survive. The firm can stand. You know, they can source for projects. They can create projects themselves. That's the kind of inspiration I want from the younger generation. If you keep on thinking you're going to depend on somebody, how long will it last? And that's why a lot of firms are shrinking. And that's why a lot of firms are finding it difficult to even keep staff. I have a lot of fellow colleagues who say, look, everybody's on contract. When I get the job, I call them. When the job is not there, I don't call them. And it happens in firms because this curve goes up and down, you know. But what I keep on saying is that build your capacity. Even if you're not with a job, you could actually be creating value that firms could actually be engaging you. You know, one of my first interviews was with a big time senior architect. And I showed him my renderings and I said, look, I do this part-time. He looked at them and said, how much do you earn from these renderings? And I told him, I've done for this firm, I've done for that firm, I've done this one. He said, look, Mr. Man, you are earning far, far more than someone who is 7 years your senior in my office. So why should I employ you? Go out there and survive. And anything you need, come back and meet me. I said, I need the experience. I need to work in a firm. He said, look, go and start working. You're ready. You are working already. It was strange because it was a very, very senior architect, a fellow of the institute. And, you know, he was in my dad's contemporary. But I still went ahead to look for a job with an architect because I said, look, I needed somebody to guide me through my pupillage and for me to sit for my professional exams. But even while I was working there, I was still doing renderings and doing drawings for other architects. I even doing drawings for my colleagues as well and earning money. So I was independent. Yeah. What were your challenges as a developer? Transiting from the artist, the dreamer, drawer, the designer to thinking in financial figures, naira and kobo and dollars. So the challenge was learning financial engineering, as they say. You know, you can learn architecture and engineering, but then financial engineering is another thing entirely. I had to go for a course in Dubai on financial analysis for real estate projects. Cost me a fortune. I think that entire trip cost me like maybe $5,000 in about, that was around 2010 or 2012. But it was an eye opener. You have to invest in acquiring that knowledge about real estate development, and when you will learn with experience and with resources that you acquire. You need to be able to understand the real estate market. You need to know what will sell and what will not sell. You need to know what society wants and does not need. You don't create a need, you meet a need. You need to learn about the rules about real estate, maximum return on investment. That's what makes you a developer, the ROI. Then you need to know about financial analysis. There are different rules to real estate, and you need to learn them all. So it's going to take you some time. You might want to have a mentor, somebody to work with on a project who can guide you through. I look at some projects and I tell you that it's not financially viable, it's not going to sell, it's not going to fly. Some people say, "Oh, I'm going to do this, I want to do this, I want to do that." I said, "Look, there is no market for what you're doing." When they go on that journey, they come back and I tell them, "But I told you so." Some are technical issues. There are some difficult sites that if you attempt to do real estate on them, you probably shoot yourself in the leg. So these are things you learn from experience, and you learn from other people's experiences. There's so many organizations worldwide that you can join that talk about real estate. There's an organization for those who want to design retail malls and supermarkets. There's an institute for it, International Shopping Institute. There is one for urban planners. There is Urban Land Institute. There is Center for Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. They deal with tall buildings. I've attended about 2 or 3 of their conferences. So you can learn from those organizations by attending their seminars, taking their courses too as well. So I'm always encouraging people. It's just the learning curve that you need to take. And some other people do mentorship. There's another question, as you mentioned in Asset for a Friend. Will this be property, bonds, and shares? It's everything. It's even the equipment in your office. Yeah. It's the computers in your office. It's the latest software you have in your office. It's your library. With a library and resource, you could write a feasibility report on anything. Look, I've been asked to write a feasibility on planning regulations that was contravened by a developer, and the estate really wanted to petition the government. I wrote that report in 2 days, and I tell you, I was paid some good money. That probably could be about my 1 month salary in 2 days. So it's the resources I had that I put to bear. So investment could be in architecture. Yes, could be assets in architecture. I had a statement by Warren Buffett who said his own idea is put all your eggs in one basket and guard it. Some people say you need to have put assets in multiple kinds of things. He says put it in one basket and guard it. And the truth is that what you know is better than what you don't know. So you won't see me putting my money in the stock market. That's the truth. I dread it. And when the crash came the last time, I escaped it. And I see people come with all kinds of money schemes. You put your money in this, it will amount to this. I tend to want to put my money in architecture, because I believe that's where I'm going to get the greatest return. And I can tell you that, look, the returns can exist, can be with you for the rest of your lifetime. If you look at all our top architects, Norman Foster, Raphael Vinoni, who is late now, you look at all the big names, Renzo Piano, you see that their age bracket, Calatrava, they're all in their late 70s, 80s. Some of them are hitting 90. Frank Gehry, they are not young people, but they are still getting the big jobs. And someone like IMP lived until 105, and he was still working. So what I tell people is that it's a profession that is a profession for old men. That's what they say. That you actually, when you get to that level of experience, you churn out the best of the best. But the truth is that the previous, let's say you graduated at 2022, if this adage that it takes 40 years to great architecture, it means you did some serious work for those 40 years. So by the time you get into your 60s and early 60s, you should be churning out some incredible buildings. But is that what we're seeing in Nigeria? I think we're seeing the reverse. Most architects are fading away in their 60s. That's the truth. But it's the reverse everywhere else in the world. Pick all the big names you can pick up in architecture, except the younger ones like maybe like Bejac. And then when you look at Bejac, it's not just Bejac alone in his firm. He has some very senior colleagues in his firm who are much, much older, but he's the brand. So you need to look at it that experience comes in. There is no firm that works with just young minds alone. Check it out. So if you look at Otto Gensler, it took him years, 50 years to build that firm. But he had a lot of senior people with him. You look at, even if you go back to look at Jim Novell, Rem Koolhaas, Zumta, Peter Zumta, and you see these architects, you realize that great architecture comes with years of experience. So that capacity is what we need to start building in Nigeria. Yes, you can do a building, but it could be massive, it could be expensive, but we need to have that architecture. I saw a young man do a design, and I told him, you need to go and pick up a book of history of architecture. I said, because you mixed about 3 or 4 or 5 historical elements together from disparate eras. So everything is clashing. You're mixing Greek columns with Roman columns, with Etruscan columns and pedestals. There is really no thought to the architecture that you have created. You need to understand the style. You need to understand the form. You need to understand the reading. You need to understand the scale and be able to look at that design and say, look, this is, when they're writing a critique of your architecture, there's something to write about. There's a theory behind your design. I'm still developing those skills. So I'm still constantly reading history of architecture. In fact, I'm reading the 10 books of architecture by Vitruvius. And I actually used it for a lecture, to some soldiers and engineers and architects, and they were shocked. They never heard of Vitruvius. And what I can say is that it's one of the first books on architecture, really. But you can see the theories inside that book. And that's where we need to get to create great architecture. So I want to see us design buildings that year in, year out are there. Nobody wants to touch them. It might be a simple building, but it's making money for the client. I say, look. Even if it's a cheap bungalow, but it's so efficient, the return on investment is there that the client says, look, I can't afford to demolish this building because I'm going to lose. So that's when we start talking about architecture. So I encourage a lot of the younger generation to always have a book of history of architecture beside them. I have 2 copies of Sir Bannister Fletcher. And I tell people that, look, every time I want to do a design, I still go back to that book to look at pages in it. I have other history of architecture books. And we need to instill that design philosophy, in our architecture. So it's timeless in whatever we're doing. So if you're doing a modern retail building, if you're doing a modern housing complex, you also need to realize that 10 years from now, someone needs to still look at that building and say, look, I'm in love with it. So you need to, people need to look at architecture from that perspective. And I'm always encouraging the younger generation that, look, if you produce good work, it means you're going to bring money into your office. It means you're going to bring resources into your office. And that way you can have a seat at the table. That's the truth. And you see, if you are indispensable, that's when you're valuable. If you are dispensable, somebody else will take your place. And I've had that experience before, where I worked in the office and I had to displace someone. It was a sad experience for me because that was the person that brought me to the office. And it's something you have to be careful about. If you want to be at the apex of your game, it means you need to build capacity. Your office should be able to tell you, look, there's a prospect we are pitching, and you can go and secure it. But if you are the person that you can only sit in the office and just do, you are just a card monkey. I don't know why they keep you in that office. Yeah, you need to bring something to the table. There are so many opportunities. That's what I say. To create great work in Nigeria.
Mm. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome.
Well, we are literally out of time, and I'm hoping there won't be. I want to say thank you very much, Architect Ladipo Lewis. Thank you. It's been a very, exciting time. I mean, I've been taking notes profusely, and I think, yeah, I have. I mean, I think two more learning points for me has been that architecture is a marathon, and you said that. I mean, like you said here, you said that it could take 40 years
Yeah.
to be a good architect. I mean, that would sound kind of or sound like, oh, I mean, you mean these guys don't want us to climb up to the top? And I understand you, and I know what that means. Really, to be at the top in any profession, any career, particularly a professional practice like architecture, medicine, real estate, it takes decades to get it, to the top. And thank you for saying that. Architecture is not it's not a 5-year journey, and I think the university curriculum, tries to do a miniature of that by making you go through 6 years, telling you, hey, you are not like your peers who do 4 years, 5 years. You are different. You are strange, and prepare for your future. That it's a future not necessarily of torture, but one that will come with so much pain. And but of course, it's profiting as you move on in the profession. And I think the final learning point for me is the fact that the architect wants to be a developer must understand financial engineering, and I think that's a very interesting one. We know structures,
Yeah.
we know building construction. We must now also know money construction.
Money construction.
Yes, to stay in business and to really stay afloat. Thank you very much, Alalade. It's been a very interesting journey.
Thank
I
you.
can
Thank
tell you that we are going to call you back again. We have a conference that will coming up during the year that will deal with the issues around practice. And I think I believe in big practice because I believe the same way a software company can generate billions in revenue, an architect should do that. And I saw that I think a couple of years ago, Gensler's annual revenue was about $2 or $3 billion.
you. Yeah.
That was inspiring.
Yeah.
But if you look at that's a 50-year-old, 60-year-old practice. But when you see a software giant in 10, 15 years, they've put it over. But of course, you can even start from there in this climb. I think we'll be doing very well. So I believe there's still a lot to learn about building great practices in this country.
Yeah.
And I think people like you are equipped for that. And we also have some very senior colleagues, some very senior architects who would also be a guide in that respect. Thank you very much, Alalade. It's been interesting listening to you. I'm not surprised at your delivery. I've always admired your cerebral approach to architecture, and I think today you've done justice to that again. Thank God that this particular presentation is online, and I think generations to come will learn from it. And I think in particular, the pride you took in your work, in archiving your work, is something worth emulating. That you had your works from 200 level, 300 level. I mean, those were works. That means you kept those works about 35 to 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I think when people approach their work in this manner, it's difficult not to go far. I mean, I can also share that I think I mean I'm doing a bit of that. I was taking through my archives and I saw some works that I produced about 20 years ago. I was very happy with myself and I kept them somewhere on my shelf. So seeing yours 40 years work, I think I will go and do better and make sure the sheets are clean. When I was well, thank you very much, sir. It's been
Thank
a
you.
very interesting time with
Thank
you
you.
today. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And to our audience, we'll meet again next month about this time. In the next couple of weeks, we'll let you know the presenter. Another very experienced architect will be sharing with us on this platform. Thank you very much and have a wonderful time. See you next month and
Thank
God
you.
bless you.
God
Thank
bless.
you, sir.
Bye.